Ladies and gentlemen, this evening the Edwards Public Library Friends Organization is very proud to be hosting our first ever Friends Author Speak. And tonight's honored guest is my colleague and a coach, a teacher, and an inspirational and motivational speaker, William Moore.
Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome.
I don't know how motivated we're going to get tonight, but it's a beautiful day here in Southampton, Massachusetts, and here at the Edwards Library. And I just want to thank Kristen especially for reading through my book and inviting me here tonight to speak with you guys and you guys coming out. It's just exciting, and you're giving up the lovely weather outside, which we don't always have here in New England. So it's nice to see you here. Please, if you have a question along the way or you want me to go in a certain direction, you know, I'm here for you more than anything else. So please feel free to speak up. And you know, I bore kids to death every day in the classroom, so I don't need to do the same thing to you. Please participate. Just a little bit about the book. And, you know, it's funny because today we're supposed to share some quotes, I guess, motivational afterwards as part of Kristen's program. And just some great things have happened since I published this in December. And here we are now in you know, the middle of June 2014. But I got an email today, and there's a couple of psychologists putting together a psychology book that has to do with the field of work and you know, motivating employees, and they asked to quote my book, and that was a great thing today. I was in Boston for the marathon, or marathon weekend, and I ended up chatting to a couple of people who are ultra marathoners, and one of them is a blind runner. And she's actually giving a speech tonight at the commencement at our high school. And you know, she was there when the bombs went off, and I'm a little choked up talking about it because she's such a dynamic person. But you know, she runs ultra marathons, 100 miles a day. And she sent me an email today, and she had a great quote, and I just want to share it with you, just to give you an idea if I can find it here. She said, "I promised myself I could count on me every single time." And that just kind of struck me, you know, that she goes out there and she runs these trails every single day, sometimes with guides and sometimes with no guides, you know, running 100 miles in a weekend, and that she was going to count on her. And I think the big premise behind the book is I wanted to create people that could be counted on. I wanted to become a person that could be counted on. And that really was my motivation to write this. You know, so I was touched when she wrote that today. And then the third thing, I was reading through a bunch of research papers today that my students did as we're wrapping up the school year. And one of my students, Michaela Bennett, wrote this. She was talking about education these days, and she said, "Not all students have the privilege of being taught these lessons outside of school." And she was talking about character. And that struck me because that was another impetus behind writing the book, is that not everybody gets taught these lessons, and we kind of take it for granted that they're being taught. But I thought it was good stuff. A little bit about me. I was born in Pittsburgh. I grew up in New Jersey in a small town much like this one. One of my first research projects is I had to go to the Grandin Library in Clinton, New Jersey, and do a research project on the building and the history of it. And it was just an amazing thing. And here I am in a library. I'm talking. I'm a history teacher. You know, it's kind of a pivotal moment in my life. Libraries are special places. Mark Twain said something to the effect that you walk in and the wisdom just oozes into you when you walk in the building. And it's just a great atmosphere. You know, all these ideas are floating around, but there are no arguments. You know, people are able to learn here. Ray Bradbury had a quote about a library too, that he was poor. And in this day and age, college educations are terribly expensive. And he said he went to the library 3 times a day for 10 years, and that was his education. We all know what a great author he was. So to be in a library speaking with you tonight is just a great, great thing, and I truly appreciate it. Anyway, I grew up in Clinton, New Jersey. I ended up coming up to New England to go to the University of New Hampshire. I had a football scholarship. My father, I wanted to go to school locally, and my father said, "You got one offer to go play football, and they're going to pay for school. It's already decided where you're going to go." So I went to the University of New Hampshire and had a great experience there. And I graduated with a history degree. Really didn't have any time to do education classes. And long story short, I was kind of torn whether I wanted to coach college football full time or become a teacher. And I needed to get some experience, some more academic credits as far as education goes, and I needed to teach. And I ended up in Pittsfield, Maine. And Pittsfield, Maine is a very, very small town. It has 4 bar stools. I was 25 years old. You had to get there very early, on a Friday night if you wanted to sit down. And what I did when I was up there is I really wanted to get out of Maine after that. I found out that the seasons they have up there is basically snow and then black fly season, and that was about it. And I wrote a letter to every single college that played football in North America. And I do mean North America, Canada. Apparently there are teams in America, Samoa. They got a letter from me as well. In the back of the dictionary, this is the days before the internet, in the back of the dictionary were all the college addresses. So I just put football and that college address. And I got a phone call from Princeton University, and I got to go back to New Jersey. Spent a year coaching at Princeton, New Jersey. It was a great experience for me. We were sitting in the football office the one day, and we were deciding whether, a pass route where a receiver goes out for a catch, whether he was going to go from 10 yards to 12 yards or he was going to go from 8 yards to 10 yards. And I was bored to tears. And I decided after that I needed to teach because I wanted to talk about things other than just football. And long story short, I ended up at Springfield College, and here I am in New England. I've been here ever since. And I did my graduate work there. And I'm very excited to do that. I tell you this because at some point I might mention 1 or 2 of these things as we go through. The book. I think it's kind of traditional when you're in a library to read a little bit of the book, so I just want to read you a little bit of the introduction. To come to hard-fought conclusions that have been previously concluded is the measure of life's frustration. So much of our knowledge is arduously self-acquired, when it could have been otherwise so readily won. Each day we hear or read something in repose that we have already learned in agony. We waste time navigating by trial and error, and thus descend countless avoidable ravines. How much better off would we be if we had first taken pause to strengthen our being and acquire a more accurate and durable compass for life? How invaluable would it be to save the time and tears we tragically lose to our preventable missteps? And really that's what I wanted to do. The book is a preemptive strike. Too often I think when it comes to teaching people character and toughness, and I'll get into the traits a little bit later on, we do it after mistakes. We do it after the errors. And I found through my experience as a football coach and a teacher, and more importantly a father, that I wanted to teach the people I worked with about these traits beforehand. And that way they could avoid some of the mistakes that I had made and that others had made. So really that's what I set out to do. And obviously I talked about some football experience and some teaching experience as well. The premise of the book is simple. Your plans, however brilliant, will ultimately succeed or fail based on the character and mental toughness of those who must carry them out. I think all of us, whatever our fields are, whether it's music, whether we're in the military, whether we're teachers, whether we're in a corporate world, we kind of get caught up in the technical aspects of whatever field we're in, and we forget about the human aspects. And I think there are some principles in the book that apply across fields. They apply to people. And I think there are certain traits of success that help us no matter what our endeavor is. Whether we want to get in shape, whether we want to be more articulate, whatever it might be. But I think these traits definitely apply. And that's been the great part of the book, is I really tried to, when I first started writing it, people were trying to say you should write a football book. And I wanted to appeal to more people than just football. I wanted to, teach people, no matter what their endeavor might be, about how they could possibly succeed from a fundamental stance. And I'm really glad I did. I don't know how much I succeeded or I failed in that regard, but I am glad I did it. We all have instances I think we run into every day. For example, I think there were people who were supposed to be here this evening tonight to entertain us, and they didn't show up. And these are the things the events that happen to us on almost a daily basis. And really they feed right into what we're talking about, I think, here in the book. I just want to read one more bit for you. Does everything happen for a reason, or do we reason everything that happens? The consequences of success or failure are huge. The reasons for success or failure are small. Parents can see their child's future brightened or dimmed when their child makes just a couple of whimsical decisions. The fortunes of companies are made or destroyed by the actions of a single employee with questionable integrity. Coaches are fired when just a few of their athletes do not perform close to their potential or make poor decisions off the field. Likewise, coaches can be fast-tracked when an overlooked recruit develops to his full potential and leads the team to a great season. Relationships are strengthened or ruined when a partner takes a single passionate act. Even the sanctity of academia is changing as teachers increasingly are evaluated primarily on the performance of students. They do not choose and cannot fire. How often are you disappointed or find you are complaining because something does not get done or done right or done on time? Think for a moment how often you hear yourself or others complain. If you are attuned, you hear complaining constantly. My fellow coaches speak of the lack of effort of their players. Fellow teachers talk about the students not paying attention or doing their work. People speak of the lack of ambition or initiative, or a persistent and annoying sense of entitlement. My father complains incessantly about the clerks at the market, the driver on the road, the employee on the other end of a service call. My friends and family speak of their problems at work and at the mall. My point being that we all encounter these situations, and we get caught up in the elements of that situation. Whether it's somebody who's supposed to be here tonight and they're not here. The clerk is slow to serve you wherever you might go for a cup of coffee. But we all encounter these situations. And rather than get caught up in the element of that situation, if we look at it from a different perspective, it's a matter of character and toughness. And those things aren't necessarily taught. And we keep finding ourselves in these situations again, both individually and as a society. And really, that was my hope, is to call attention to this. Not only that we have these problems, but they can be changed through education. And really, that's what I wanted to do, is set about to try to educate people. Let me just find this one part for you. So, when I first got to Westfield High School, which is where I've been coaching most recently, the high school had not won a game in 2 years. And I walked in the door and people said, this is a great high school football town, and it was 10 years prior to my walking in the door. There was a proud tradition there, but the team had not been very good. So I'm a pretty competitive person, and I think I worked very hard, and I got the players to work very hard and buy in, and we had some success. We had more wins. We had more wins the year after. And then finally we had our first winning season in about 15 years in 2005. And in 2006 we had a really nice group of kids coming back, and they pretty much did everything I asked. And I thought I had it all down, be at this place at this time and do what I ask you to do, and we're going to be successful. And they did all those things. But what I found is once adversity and stress started to strike, they weren't successful. And although I taught the character piece, I really hadn't taught the mental toughness piece. And I found myself, as many of us do, getting angry that things weren't working out. I had done everything right. It was all looking good on paper. But then we introduced the human element. The stress started to come, the players started to buckle, and we lost some games. At the same time, and I'm not going to go into great detail, I went into it a little bit in the book, I was having my own personal struggles. So as I was trying to build the team up into winners, I was trying to build myself into a winner. And when I say struggles, I do mean struggles. I lived in my car. We'll just kind of start there. But I found that the traits that the team needed are the same traits that I needed in order to be successful, and the light kind of went on. And then I would watch the news, and I would find people in different predicaments, and I'm saying the traits applied to those people as well. And I feel like I kind of came up with a universal bit of knowledge that applies in a lot of different situations. Now, when you start talking about character, you start researching character. There are a million words as far as character traits go. There are different ways to describe things. And I think one of the gifts I've been granted as a teacher is, and I hate to say it, to dumb things down and to find the common elements that people can master. And that's really what I try to do. So I took this huge myriad of character traits and boiled it down to 11. And I just want to share them with you. The first one is humility. And not only did I come up with the traits or discover these core character traits, but I think there's a logical progression to how they should be taught. I don't think we just kind of apply them here and there haphazardly, but I think we try to progress from one to the next to the next. And I think if you do that, it really starts to make sense. Humility is to recognize room for improvement. One must be humble enough to realize there is such room. You either stay humble or you stay still. Many of us, I think, in education and probably in the business world can think of instances where we try to teach someone who already knew it all. So I think humility is really the first step. I know myself, I had a lot of confidence. I had accomplished, I think, a great deal. But here I was, 30-something years old, and my life's a wreck. And I was humbled. And now all of a sudden I was willing to receive those lessons. both through reading and listening to people. The second thing is caring. The second trait. To find a reason to reach goals, one must learn to care about something or someone. Sometimes we talk about an attitude problem. This person or that person might have an attitude problem in a particular instance. But I don't think we have attitude problems. I think the problem is that person doesn't know what they care about. I think as soon as you start to care about things, you can start to progress. I care greatly about my family, and as a result, I started to have some success because the decisions I was making were based on my family. I care greatly about the football program, and I had kids who bought into caring about the football program. And as a result, they were making decisions based on that, and we were heading in a positive direction. So I think caring is important. Teamwork, I think we're all aware of. To achieve something one cannot achieve alone. One must learn how to work with others towards a shared goal. Effort. I think we all need to put the work in, and I think this is a fundamental thing. My mother just got out of the hospital. She was in the hospital for about 3 months, and things weren't looking good. And one of the problems with my mother is my mother doesn't put forth the effort. And I said, Ma, you just got to do the work. That's really what all this comes down to, is either the work gets done or the work doesn't get done. And why you didn't do the work doesn't matter. Because the people who succeed do the work. And I really don't care what the field is, whether you're a librarian, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a musician, whether you're a ball player. You have to put the work in. And that's really what it comes down to. So all this is kind of geared to getting people to put forth that type of effort. My mother, fortunately, went through about, I would say about 60 days at a rehab facility. And she was having a lot of success as a result. And she said, I'm doing the work, Bill. I'm doing the work, which was great. Then I click into 3 mental toughness traits. Now, mental toughness for me is the ability to maintain your character under stress. There are all people or examples that we can think of. If people are doing the right things, you can count on them. And then things get stressful. They meet adversity. In football, I talk about 70 and sunny. When it's 70 and sunny, I have a lot of really good football players. But we play football here in New England, and sometimes we're out there, and it's pretty close to 0. Okay, in the summer months, we're up there at 90, and the humidity is pretty aggressive. We're playing a poor team, and we're having a lot of success. Those kids have great character. And now all of a sudden, we're in a Donnybrook. We're in a tough match here, and I start to see people buckle. And that's when the mental toughness aspect comes in. So I have 3 traits that I call the mental toughness traits. The first one is courage. When we face fear, courage obviously comes in. And we have this innate reaction. You've probably heard of fight or flee. But I think there's another one, freeze. Picture yourself in the woods. And you're either going to fight the bear, you're going to try to outrun the bear, or you're going to freeze. You're going to play dead. And I think that's part of our natural instinct is this freeze. And I would see my players literally lock up and just freeze under pressure. I saw it today. I gave a final exam. And, one young lady, she was just freezing. She could not answer a question. She was so stressed out. You have to fight your way through. Now, I can't tell you where or when to fight, or where or when to flee, or where or when to freeze. If you're fast and you're in the woods and the bear's coming, you run, by all means. So you have to apply those principles, to your own situation, your own circumstance. But I think what's apparent is, like I said, let's not learn through trial and error. Let's teach people these things ahead of time, so that when the stress does come, they can recognize whether they're fighting, whether they're fleeing, whether they're freezing, and what should they do. Discipline. To me, discipline is like driving a car. Sometimes you have to hit the gas, sometimes you have to hit the brakes. And then obviously you're in charge of the steering wheel. And again, I can't give you every different experience, in our human experience, about when you should hit the gas and when you should hit the brakes, when you should steer straight and when it's time to get off the highway. But I think understanding discipline, and if you understand where your goals are and what you want to do, then you just think in those simple terms. When do I hit the gas? When do I hit the brakes? When do I need to stay the course? And when do I need to get off, and go in a different direction? Perseverance. Perseverance is the ability to go over, under, around, and through those things that get in the way of a person or team achieving their potential. When I went up to the University of New Hampshire, I was there on a football scholarship. And they had a depth chart that was posted on the wall. And I was the 6th team right tackle. And there were 5 guys on the left, at left tackle. And what this means was I was literally the last person on the offensive line. And it was pretty evident to everybody there. And that's where I started. Within a year, I was starting. And really, it was a matter of perseverance. In one of those early practices, I was out there and I was just scrambling. I was a kid from a small town in New Jersey, and I'm in New Hampshire. I didn't even know where that was before I went up there. We used to say, what state's New Hampshire in? We had no idea. But I was at a practice, an early morning practice, and the coach, he threw a clipboard at me. He didn't hit me, he threw it in my general direction. And, geez, I'm Crow. I think that's something they say up there. And he threw it, and more. And then later on in the practice, he threw another clipboard at me. So I went back to the dorm between practice. Before I did, the coach said, Billy, I'd like to see you in my office before the next practice. So we went to eat lunch, and my roommate ended up, he was one of the starters. He was a great player. And he was off to the NFL. And he said, I asked him, I'm like, John, has he ever thrown a clipboard before? He goes, Billy, he's thrown clipboards, but I've never seen him throw 2 in the same practice, much less at the same person. So on the way to the football office to meet with the coach, I called my mother. I said, Ma, I'm going to get sent home. I'm going to lose my scholarship. They're really upset with me. And my mother said, you need to stick it out. Whatever you do, you don't leave that campus. And that was great advice. And college is expensive, and I was on a full athletic scholarship. I don't know exactly what her motivation was, but it was good advice. And I went into the football office, and the football coach said, I walked in, and that was back in the days when you could smoke in a building, and he was sitting there smoking a cigarette. And the coach, he wanted to see me, and he said, Billy, your bench press is anemic, and you don't know your plays. And I ended up going into the weight room, and we had a weight room coach who was great, and I said, I don't know anything. Again, I was humble. And he said, I'm going to show you everything you need to do. You just need to do what I tell you to do. Put the work in. Again, it comes down to effort. And like I said, within a year I was starting, and I started for the next 3 years. The next thing is commitment. We all struggle with commitment, and I often see it in sports, I think in particular. And what I did is I've had the opportunity to speak with some teams, and I think some college teams. And when I do, I think when I talk about the commitment piece, it really resonates with them, especially the coaches. And it's a process. Commitment's a process. And I think when you think of relationships, you could probably think the same way. The first step is play or quit. Am I in or am I out? I'm not quite sure. And I think people really go through that first step. But just how powerful it is to recognize that this person doesn't know if they're in or out yet. Okay, that's the stage they're in. 2 is a semi-commit. I am committed as long as things are going well on my own terms. So we'll have a player who's there, and as long as it's 70 and sunny degrees and they're getting plenty of playing time and they're having success, they're all for it. Okay? They're committed, but on their terms. If something better comes down the line, then they're probably going to go to that something better for that day or two. And then they'll come back when it's convenient for them. The third one is a commitment to self. And the steps between the commitment to self and the semi-commit, that's a tough process, because what people find is when they're semi-committed, they don't have success. You either need to be in or out eventually. So maybe they can get a buy. They have extreme talent in one way or the other, and they can get by with semi-commit. But ultimately, they're going to be asked to make a full commitment, and they're not going to be successful. And particularly with young people, I think when they see that, they can't just show up and automatically have success, especially when you're maybe a younger athlete. And you were very successful as a younger athlete. Now you're at high school when people are starting to lift weights and attend camps, and they're putting all this effort in. You're no longer successful, and you can't figure out why. When you make this transition, it's a very difficult step. And then you come back in a commitment to yourself. And when you come back to the commitment to self, you make your mind up that I'm committed. I'm in. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to be successful in this field or endeavor. I am committed completely to getting that done. And then the fourth step is the commitment to others. So not only are you committed to yourself, but the other people in your group, in your team, in your office, whatever it might be, you're committed to them and their success. And I think when you see people go through these stages, it applies. I was talking to Bob tonight, who's a musician, and he kind of talked about some of these things in his dedication to his field. And we were talking about how the book applies to different people. And I said it to one of my teammates, and my teammate said, you know, he works on K Street in Washington, D.C. And he said, everything you say in that book, I can apply to every young lawyer who walks through this door. You know, and I think this commitment thing definitely applies across the board. Leadership. I'm sorry, the next step is initiative. Do things you see need to be done without being asked. Every day, when we go out to lacrosse, it's always a fun thing. I've been a lacrosse coach for a long time. And we will be in the middle of lacrosse practice, and the kids will say, Coach, we don't have any water. In the meantime, outside the locker room, there's a water jug. And all of them walked by that water jug and pretended they didn't know it was there. They didn't have the initiative to pick up the water jug and say, you know what, I'm not going to let that water jug beat me today. I'm going to be mentally tough enough to fill it up, pick it up, and drag it out to practice. Okay? And it takes a while, and they pretend that, you know, it doesn't exist. But suddenly now they have some initiative. And it's funny because, especially with young people, I think, you know, they want to get by rather than get better. You know, and how often, you know, do we find ourselves in the same situation? I think we're hardwired for efficiency. We want to find the easiest path, the quickest route. I think we all are. And I think, again, through trial and error, we discover that's maybe not the best way to go about it. But young people are particularly susceptible. But I think once kids start to grasp initiative, I don't need to ask them to do things. They see what needs to be done, and they go ahead and do it for themselves. I mean, think how valuable an employee is who has initiative. Leadership is the next thing, and there's a whole chapter on it. I think we're all kind of well-versed on leadership, so I'll leave it be. The last character trait I have is awareness. And I think when you have awareness, you're aware of all the different variables that are going on in a decision. Not just one trait in particular, but all the different traits. Where people are as far as their development for those traits. As I speak with you tonight, I know we have servicemen present, you know, we have actors present, we have retirees present, we have people from a variety of different fields. And I have to be cognizant of that. I'm not talking to a team tonight. I'm not talking to a small business owner and his employees tonight. And I think there's a certain element of awareness there. But once you start to grasp the traits and you have them down, it's a wonderful thing, because it makes the decision process so much easier. I think there was a movie with Keanu Reeves, and I can't think of what it was. Can you guys help me out? The Matrix. The Matrix, and I don't know if you saw it, but you know, Neo has this travel through the Matrix movie, and at the end, he can see ones and zeros. He can see what's happening in the future. He can literally dodge bullets. And I think once you grasp this awareness trait, you start to dodge bullets. You start to step away from the missteps. You start to see, I know what's going on right now, and I know what's going to happen a half hour from now. I know how this is going to play out in the long run, and I think that's where the awareness piece comes in. The other person I think of is Martin Luther King. On the eve of his assassination, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, trying to support the garbage union that was on strike there, and they were doing a march in Memphis, and the march went bad and became violent. And Martin Luther King hopped in a car and drove away. And a lot of people called him a coward for that. You know, how can you just walk away? Things started to get violent. This is when we needed you most. The next night, he appeared at a church and he gave his mountaintop speech. And I'm sorry, he gave his mountaintop speech, and he talked about the fact that, you know, he may not get there. He was aware of the threats on his life. He kind of knew how the situation was going to play out. To me, he had incredible awareness. You know, it was like a premonition of his own passing. Not only that, but an affirmation that his movement was going to eventually succeed. Do you have any questions about anything? This is what I ask my students when I ramble on. If you do, please.
Bill?
Yeah.
I just would like you to touch upon one of the concepts that I read in the book, which is the easy way versus the character way.
I think ultimately that's what this comes down to, is that's the prevailing principle in the book, is we each face decisions through the course of our day, 10s, 20s, hundreds of decisions. And we can either take the easy way. Like I said, we're hardwired for efficiency. We want to get by rather than get better. So we take the easy path. Or the character way, which isn't necessarily the easier path. In a lot of ways it looks more difficult. And I think ultimately if we can take the character way, we're going to be successful. But that takes some study and practice in order to become cognizant of that. And I've had a lot of people come back to me, and that's the one premise I think they grab from the book, is that all of a sudden they're thinking, is this the character way or the easy way? What is Coach Moore saying here? It's in my head. Is it this the character way or the easy way in the decision process that I'm making? But I think all of a sudden you become cognizant about your choices that you're making. And sometimes we're just making those through like rote memory. But now we've increased our awareness, we've increased our consciousness. Sometimes the easy way is the right way. It doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. But I think the character way is more difficult in the long run. And I think when you take the character way, you have a great ascent. It's tough, you're going uphill, but you're making progress. And the view from above the clouds is a wonderful thing once you reach your goals. If you take the easy way, that's all downhill. And then ultimately you're sitting there at the bottom of the mountain, things aren't going very well, and you have that much more mountain to scale. So I think in a lot of ways it plays into short-term and long-term thinking as well. But that's one of the things, I always tell the kids or tell the team, and that's one of the things that comes back to me is this: do you want to take the character way or the easy way? The mental toughness chapter, just some things as far as mental toughness. So what is mental toughness? My definition is a bit simple. Mental toughness is the ability to maintain character when confronted with stress. So the first principle is to tie your actions to your goals. Suddenly you become cognizant of your decisions. I have not had a cupcake yet. Oh, excuse me. But when I do have a cupcake, I'm really hoping to limit myself to one, because although I've dropped 30 pounds since the fall, I literally couldn't walk at the end of football season. I was diagnosed with arthritis in my hip when I was 28. I'm 45 now. I've rehabbed to the point where I can run a little bit, and I've dropped 30 pounds, and I'd like to continue that. So I have a big decision here with the cupcakes that are available tonight. But I'm going to be cognizant of that. My goal is to drop a few more and to be able to get around and possibly run for real at the end of the summer. Visualize is the second thing, and I think we're all kind of familiar with that. Visualize what you're going to have to do. When I have to take a team, especially on a road trip, I will visualize with them every step in the process. We're going to get off the bus. The fans are going to yell obscenities at you and tell you you're going to lose. Okay? The other team's going to be rowdy. They're going to be physically imposing. And we'll talk about how to deal with all these situations well beforehand. I learned this through trial and error, but I don't want my players to. We would show up to games and the team would be particularly fierce during warm-ups before the game, and it was it. We didn't stand a chance after that, but I found by talking our way through it, we're successful. One of the key phrases we talk about is handle it. Handle it. There are days, and I relate it to, especially to my football players, there are days your girlfriend just broke up with you, your dog died, you have 3 papers due, SATs are Saturday, your boss is complaining because you're not at work, your stomach is upset, it's 90 degrees with a 90% humidity, and you're at football practice, and all this is going through your head, and ultimately handle it. And that became a mantra, especially one year our team kind of grasped and rallied around it, and we had a lot of success. But handle the pressure. The next principle is to start. Just start. Sometimes our motivation is not there at the beginning. Sometimes we have to get going and our motivation meets us in the middle. Start. The next one is to finish. As simple as it is. Here we are, I'm at the end of the school year, and we're having kids that are having a real difficult time. They've had a lot of success, and now it's time to study for exams, and they just can't bring themselves to study for exams. You've had all this success, and now you're not going to put some time into study. Finish what you start. I think that's an important lesson. I think this next piece is terribly important. Know the enemies of character, of mental toughness. The enemies are ignorance, apathy, and justification. Justification is nothing but an excuse dressed up in plausibility. People justify themselves constantly. I always try to catch myself not justifying myself. That's one thing I don't want to do. I worked out today. I worked out this morning. I worked out this afternoon. I deserve that extra cupcake sitting over there waiting for me. We can justify pretty much anything, and I think we have to become aware of that. And I think especially as a teacher and a coach, I see it all the time. I think we know what ignorance is and apathy. Avoid the easy way. Recognize when you're taking the easy way, and stop and pause and question yourself. Is this way, this path that I'm taking, really going to get me where I want to go? Adapt to change. Adapt to change. I think that's a mental toughness thing. You know, suddenly we're out there and it's pouring rain and it's sunny and it's snowing, and that's all in one day here in New England. You know, you have to adapt and change. The world is much different. Just in the 20 or so years I've been in education, you know, it's changed greatly. You have to adapt to change. I think this next piece is important too. Don't complain. Don't complain. It is so easy just to complain all the time. My father is a huge complainer. I love him greatly, but he's going to complain about everything in the world, and my pop do something about it. And he tries to teach people lessons every once in a while, and I don't know if he's as nice about it maybe as I am, but you know, don't complain. The last piece is make the best of it. When I got divorced in 2001. It was a particularly difficult experience, and within a couple years my sons ended up in New Jersey, and they were about a 5-hour car ride from here, and that was a difficult time period for us. Then they moved to Tennessee, and now they're 1,000 miles away, and I really wanted to be a rock for my kids, and I wanted to teach them lessons, and that was one of the reasons why I started writing these things. I wanted to give my kids some lessons. And one thing we always told each other is, what do? We make the best of it. You know, things might not always be the way we want them to be, but we're going to make the best of it. And we really have. You know, they're very successful. They're both straight A students. They're doing well in sports. Knock on wood, it's not over yet. I know that. But it's nice to see. And just make the best of the situation. Sometimes we're so focused on the fact that things are going wrong, and we lose perspective that there are some things that are right. There are still some things we can do to be successful, to find success in this situation, but make the best of it. And I can ramble on. You know, I wrote a book. You guys have been terribly patient with me. I think just to sum things up that, you know, I think there's some great principles in the book. I learned them the hard way. But I wanted to make sure that the people I love and care about don't have to. And I think it's terribly important we learn the lessons ahead of time. Like the young lady said, who I quoted in the beginning, you know, not everyone has the privilege to learn these lessons outside of school. We don't have a character education program where I teach. We don't spend any time on it. Character is learned as a result of something else. You know, we coach lacrosse, and you're going to learn some character stuff along the way. You know, I'm going to teach social studies, and I'm going to, you know, teach you how to behave a little bit. But we don't have a proactive system. No one's out there teaching these traits actively at the secondary level. And I say no one, at least my school's not. You know, we have some posters up, but really we haven't continued it farther than that. And I think ultimately the big lesson here is be proactive. We don't have to learn the hard way. We don't have to learn through trial and error. We can be much smarter in the way we approach things. And I think the book is the start of that. What I hope ultimately is a movement that people say, you know what, character should be taught. We should take pause, because our character flaws are going to show up. No matter how brilliant your plan is, it's ultimately going to come down to the character and mental toughness of the people who have to execute it. No matter what your field is, that's going to apply. So why aren't we teaching these things ahead of time? Why are we waiting until our brilliant plan fails because we didn't teach them? And I think ultimately that's the direction I hope this goes. I really appreciate you guys sitting here tonight and listening to me. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
You wanted to write the book because partially your sons and everybody who needs this information. Did that make it easy enough that you could just go for it, or did you have to work all through the hard stuff to make it go from start to finish?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think this started organically. I wanted to, you know, we're limited, as a football coach, I was limited to my access to my players. I couldn't meet with them year round. And I would find from football season, and then I would have some of the kids in lacrosse season later in the spring, some of those lessons had been lost. And it took a few weeks for them to sink in again. And that's when I decided to be proactive. So I would start sending them letters to their homeroom once a week. You know, it might be a piece I read, it might be a quote, whatever it might be. And then I would start putting these in the folder for my sons. And that kind of blossomed a little bit, and I've always liked to write. And I would write my teams a letter, you know, the players a letter or two along the way. And I started to put those up on our school website. I have a teacher page. And then what I found is maybe that's not an appropriate place for it. So I started a blog. and the blog is coachbillmoore@wordpress.com. And I started to put these pieces together. And then I sat there and I would try to articulate all this to people, and they would get a piece here, a piece there, and in my head there was a logical progression. I really wanted to put it all down in one place. And I sat there one April vacation, and I had 2 little kids, and they were busy playing, and the weather was terrible, and we're stuck inside, and I just kind of banged it all out on my laptop in a week, and put it all together and tried to make it as fluid as I possibly could. And then I gave it to a couple of English teachers who were kind enough to read through it for me, and then summer hit, and I lost my laptop, so I wasn't able to use it, and then football season hit. And then as soon as Christmas vacation came about, I sat down for 3 days, learned how to self-publish and upload things, which was an arduous task and took a lot of mental toughness, and then ultimately published it.
Great.
And then one of the things I've been able to do is, the blog. The blog's a great thing. I would hear from people from like Los Angeles or somewhere, in Africa or Europe would send me a note. I read your piece, and now all of a sudden it kind of dawned on me that I can branch out. There are people that would like to hear this message and can apply it to what they do. I've taken to social media a little bit, particularly Twitter, but there's coaches and business people and young people all over the country who are following and reading, and it's kind of expanding. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
How do you deliver this to a, 11-year-old girl, 12-year-old, right? I guess, as a parent, it's like, I guess maybe little lessons every day, like modeling it. And
that's a great answer. That's a great question. I teach this the way I would teach anything, because I think ultimately that's what I'm going to do. I'll put it up on the board. I'll talk about it. I'll bring it up when it comes up through the course of events. And I think if you narrow down the traits, all of a sudden the word pops in. We were at the pool the other day, and there was a particularly hyperactive child, and mom was really trying. We belong to a gym, and there's a significant elderly contingent in there, and there's some pressure on it. It's almost like the library of gyms. You need to be quiet, and this kid was just unruly, and mom was really trying. And I wanted to tell mom, hey, teach him to hit the brakes. Teach him he needs to steer himself in the right direction. Discipline, just small little lessons. And I think once you become aware of those lessons, all of a sudden the instance appears and you can apply them, whether it's to your children or your other endeavors. So really that's my approach.
Bill, just to buttress your question, I want to share a character moment with you. And as you and I were speaking before the presentation, I said that growing up, a lot of this stuff that I read in your book, it echoed in my mind. My father's voice was just boom, 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 pounding away in there. And I think that depending on how you were raised or how you raise your kids, I think you can teach them a lot of this stuff, as you say, modeling. Now, my little story, very brief. About 20 years ago, we bought our first home. Didn't have much money, little ranch. I needed a garage. And, to me, I got power tools and all this. I just have to have a garage. So I didn't have any money. I'm going to build it myself. And so I got busy and started the project. Well, a friend of mine who grew up in the building trades, his dad owned a construction company and all this stuff, he came over to visit, and he saw the cellar hole, for the foundation all dug out. And he says, oh, that's pretty good. Who'd you get to do that? And I said, I did it. Oh, did you rent a backhoe? I said, no, I did it with a shovel. And he says, you dug that whole thing out by hand? I said, yeah. He says, that's the kind of stuff our dad made us do as kids because he said it would teach us character.
Right?
So there you go.
Now, as I hear this story in my head, I'm initiative. You wanted a garage. It wasn't just going to happen.
No.
You weren't buying a lottery ticket. You went out there and started to do it. And you cared. So now you're caring about having a garage. The foundation is dug because you cared that much for it. You know, that just brings up a story I talk about in the book is we were trying to move the kids into a better school district, so we had to move. And really there was a limited time to do it. And I was up on a ladder at 2 o'clock in the morning with a headlamp on, painting our house. There was a government program at the time that, you know, provided some initiative for us to get out of there. And I still remember the neighbors looking at me like, what is this guy doing? But, you know, long story short, we moved and they still live there. Because I was willing to get up on a ladder at 2 o'clock in the morning and do what I had to do because I cared. You know, I wanted the kids to go to better schools. But that's a great story. Thank you for sharing. Anything else? Well, you guys have been great. I'm going to be around to chit chat. The card is there. There are copies of the book available if you have an interest. At least please grab a card. My website's on there, my contact information. I'd love to hear from you. It's one of the great joys of putting this out there, as I've heard from some great people. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Coach Malone.